Brilliant. So I can see more people are joining us, but I am going to make a start now. Thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. My name is Gemma Holyoake and I am a Senior Project Advisor at Community-Led Housing London. This afternoon's talk, Recirculating Rent in Cooperatives, is part of our Doing Housing Differently series, which has been taking place over the last couple of days. We've been looking at how the principles underpinning housing is delivered at scale in London and across the UK. So community-led housing can come in all shapes and sizes, including community land trusts, co-housing projects, cooperatives and tenant management organisations. More than a tenure type or design typology, community-led housing is about residents' control and representation in the delivery and management of housing. So far this week, we've covered innovation in financing projects, how housing associations can support communities, and how local authorities can empower residents by working in partnership. This afternoon, we're looking at the potential London housing cooperatives have to deliver more affordable rented homes through development, acquiring property and loan stock. In 2019, the Mayor of London announced a £38 million London Community Housing Fund, available to community-led housing organisations, including cooperatives, to explore expansion and development plans. So today we want to hear from London's co-ops on how they're growing. What are the motivations to build new cooperative homes in London? And how can other cooperatives support new homes, either by looking at delivery themselves or investing in others? So before I hand over to our chair today, I'm just going to do a few housekeeping rules in this new online format. First of all, this meeting is going to be recorded and shared online, so please bear that in mind if you do come forward with any questions today. And we do really encourage you to participate. So you may all see that Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Please post any questions you have in there and we will pick them up at the end of everybody's presentations. We also really want to know who's in the audience today. It would be really lovely to all be in a big room together, but unfortunately we can't. So please do post in the chat. Make sure that you're posting it to all panelists and attendees, and we would really love it if you could introduce yourselves today. So I'm now going to pass over to our chair today, Nick Bliss, Head of Policy at the Confederation of Cooperative Housing.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I think this will prove to be quite an interesting session, and we've got some great sort of speakers here to talk about schemes of development in London, which I'm looking forward to hearing about. As Gemma said, I mean, what we're looking at today is how can we grow the cooperative housing sector in London? How can we get sort of cooperation between co-ops perhaps to help make that happen? And this is certainly a burning question that, you know, in the Confederation of Cooperative Housing we've been looking at generally across the cooperative housing sector in the UK for some years, is because a number of co-ops have been around for, you know, since the 1970s and have paid off their original loans and you know, sitting on in some cases some quite substantial assets, and potentially may have the opportunity to you know, develop homes. And we've sort of been talking, you know, over several years actually, to try and encourage people to have a look at the potential of what they could be doing. And I guess this is, I mean, you know, especially if you're a registered provider co-op, you know, this is going to become sort of more and more in focus as the regulator brings in sort of new value for money arrangements where people are going to have to identify, you know, the assets that they do have on their books, and, you know, it will be, you know, quite apparent as to whether or not co-ops have got assets that they could be using to develop new homes and what have you. So, I mean, in terms of this, I know that, you know, we've had these kind of debates at our conferences and other places about it for several years. And some of the challenges, obviously, is, you know, it's like if you're, you know, a group of volunteers in a housing co-op, you know, it's a lot of work to sort of go through the process of actually trying to develop new homes and so on. So it's about how do we, you know, mobilise that and make that happen. I know in my housing co-op, so I'm first, I mean, I am the head of policy for the Confederation of Cooperative Housing, but my origins are that I'm a member of a housing co-op in Birmingham. And my housing co-op in Birmingham, called 2020 Housing Co-op, is in the process of looking at developing some new homes there. We're developing hopefully 11 new flats on some Birmingham City Council land, and I mean it's certainly involved myself and my fellow co-op members in Birmingham with some extra work to sort of do what we need to do to shape that up. But it's not been we're about to put in for planning permission, and it hasn't been as challenging as we thought it might be. We managed to get revenue grant funding from Community Housing Fund, which obviously applies outside of London, but which you guys down here in London can get through the GLO, as Gemma referred to get money to help to bring in people to work with us to do what was necessary. We developed a good relationship with Birmingham City Council, which is enabling us to develop. They provided, or not, we will have to pay for the land that they're providing for us, but they've identified, we identified the land and then went to the council and they said yes. And one of the interesting points about that was really that actually they had said previously that they were looking at developing some homes on that land, and they said that they can only get 4 homes on it. We're going to them with saying we're going to get 11, and it's not, they're reasonably sizable flats, so it's interesting that, it was a piece of land that the local authority didn't think they could do anything with. And so, it's one of the things about community-led housing is we can perhaps do things that other organisations, other providers can't do. I think, it's a challenging process, but it's something that can be done, and we think it would be really good. And we've worked. Lev came to a session we did in London a little while ago. Lev from the Community-Led Housing London came to a session we did about a year ago for members of the CTH in London, on development. And I think there was a certain amount of buzz and potential there about the process of development, and I think it would be good, hopefully, that something comes out of this session that sort of picks up some more potential for development amongst co-ops in London. I think I was also just asked to flag up some work we did previously on something that we were calling the foundation. And this was just something that we looked at a few years back, and it came from, I was fortunate enough to be able to do a study tour of the cooperative housing sector in Canada in 2016 when we were all allowed outside, and it was looking at particularly at the Community Land Trust in British Columbia, which has been looking at developing homes at scale, working with the existing cooperative housing sector. So, and it's developing. At the time that I was there, it was in the had about 5,000 homes in the pipeline, and working very closely with the government of British Columbia. And so we were trying to think, well, could we develop something of a similar scale in this country by sort of talking about an organisation that potentially could be set up to own the freehold of land and then lease to either existing or new housing co-ops done locally. So, I mean, if people wish to discuss that, I mean, it's kind of the idea. We did put together a feasibility study. We were going to work with the property group Savills, and the ministry were going to fund the feasibility study at one point. But for one reason or another, that didn't go forward. And it's kind of gone into abeyance, obviously, since the lockdown came along. But I think we may look at it again at some point in the future. But discussing the thing in relation to that, I'm happy to do so. I think I better move on now to introduce our first speaker, and our first speaker is Matina Theodoropoulou from Sanford Housing Co-op. Have I got that pronunciation right? I'm sure you'll get it right.
Excellent.
Yeah, you're going to tell us about the work that you're doing at Sanford Housing Co-op, which is great co-op.
Yes, I'll say hi everybody. My name is Matina, and I'm a development officer of Sanford Housing Co-op, together with Leonie, that is going to be talking about the CLT cash later on. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to give a little bit of background very quickly. and we're going to move into what currently we have been doing. So who we are, that's Sanford, and it's a co-op located in New Cross with approximately 120 members. We have 14 houses, one block, 14 houses here, one block of flats, a communal area and beautiful gardens. It's 1 acres, and we bought the freehold in 2015. We were given a peppercorn lease for 75 years, and we bought the freehold for 2015. So how Sanford was created very quickly, it was an activist group, housing and activist group that created the SCD, Sanford Cooperative Dwellings, where they lobbied the government and they managed to persuade the council to give them the land, as long as the families weren't living there. And they built, the council built for the young and mobile, the blocks that you see right now, that you saw in the beginning. A BBC documentary explains much more about how it came about, but it was based on the activities of the members of this cooperative that mobilized the council. Of course, at the time, there was a very big support from the government to create alternative ways of housing, so they were supporting and subsidizing. There were other projects as well, as the Laundrette, Sanford Housing Co-op, Borough of Newham, invited by the council on a former rubbish dump for 500 people, because there was a tremendous need of housing for young people in East London, as it is today as well. So there the CDS, CLH and National Community Land Trust Network, that they work together and they have been supporting in one way or the other Sanford for all these years. And some of the Sanford projects that have been happening since the inception of Sanford, from the first year actually of creating Sanford Housing Co-op, which is a mutual co-op, there was a surplus, and there was a big discussion what to do with the surplus of the first year. So there was a meeting that was held in Deptford, what was it? Deptford Hall, Town Hall. And then it was decided half of the income, half of the surplus to be used for training of the members, further training, and the other half for a homeless charity, to be given to a homeless charity. We are not sure if this process has been happening ever since then, but these are some projects that we discovered, and they haven't been materialized, but there was a talk about a communal space that at the moment Sanford is still lacking. In 1981, there was an energy project, the C60 1 million project, and that we retrofitted our houses and installed pellet stoves. A small community center got planning as well, but never got materialized. That was an initiative from the members, where we used the sleeps, the train sleepers, to house 80 plus bikes, and on top to create a roof garden that we all cherish and use, and a sitting area as well, amphitheatrical. So since 2015, there was a talk about creating a community center and additional housing as well. So there was a feasibility that was commissioned in 2017 and identified different options of how to develop more housing, either within Sanford or buying land and developing elsewhere. So the conclusion was, of course, with the London prices, that the only feasible solution would be to build in our land. Since then, we have been doing as a development team, We have been doing different planning consultations with surveys, and we commissioned architects. We asked for expression of interest, and many architects participated, where in order to discuss housing and community center in our land and identify possible locations. So we shortlisted 4, we did workshops with them, and we chose for the community center, Hayatsu Architects, where they proposed a straw bale house building with an elevated garden. At the same time, because we were interested and we are interested in developing more housing since we are a housing provider, we employed, with funding from CLH, we employed Hayatsu Architects and quantity surveyors to do feasibility studies on 3 locations within our site, and with the encouragement of CLH, investigate the public land which is adjacent to Sanford. So we did further feasibility study and proposals. As you can see, these are the 3 sites internally, and these are the 2 externally, with a maximum capacity that we could have for that space, with the intention to have a serious discussion with the council about what we can do with their land. This is the site, and this is our vision, to create 3 more houses of 8 people each house, and incorporate it and create a street view, a street front as well, at the same time. So we employed at the same time, in order to do a proper costing and identify rent increases or the most feasible solution, and how to negotiate with the council to give us the land for free. We employed Catalyst, and they are doing our financial tool, and we are at that stage at the moment. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you very much, Matina. That's interesting. Sanford has always been a really excellent co-op, always worth a visit for anybody if you guys are up for doing visits, and sounds really good in terms of what you're trying to develop, and I'm sure people will be interested in that when you've worked on that. The next scheme we've got is Brockley Tenants Co-op, again a fine co-op, and we've got 2 people who are going to talk to us here, Gina Betteridge and Jane Brenan. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work between the 2 of you, but I've been told to hand over to Gina first, so over to you, Gina.
Thanks, Nick. It's really lovely to be here. Thanks very much for the invite to speak. Brockley Tenants is very much at the start of its development journey. So I'm Gina Betteridge, I'm the manager of Brockley Tenants Co-op. My background actually is in homelessness. I spent 18 years working for a local authority, working with homeless families living in temporary accommodation. So I do know the devastating impact it has not to have a safe and secure home for those families. So I joined Brockley Tenants Co-op 2.5 years ago. And I think ever since, with Jane, right from the start, we discussed how brilliant it would be if we could, however small, actually think about development and how we could actually go about that, and maybe, you know, motivate and inspire others at the same time. So just a little bit of background about Brockley Tenants. We're based in Lewisham. The co-op was founded in 1974. Like many co-ops, it acquired properties throughout the sort of the 70s and 80s, when property prices were obviously much lower in this part of London. We actually own outright 90 units, but we manage 70 on behalf of Hexagon Housing Association as well. Makes us a larger co-op in the grand scheme of things. We are a registered social landlord as well. Not all co-ops are. So that does open doors in terms of funding, and I think, you know, hopefully makes us more attractive to investors. Obviously, since sort of the 80s, exponential rise in property prices, very much lack of funding from central government, the co-op has not grown since the 1980s. So we've just kind of stayed the same number. So 2020, we're here in 2020, we're approaching the 50th birthday of our co-op. I think there's sort of the phrase saying, I think you can use it for homeowners, sort of we feel like we're asset rich but cash poor. So obviously we own the properties, so we're financially strong. But the downside is that many of our properties, in fact, all of our properties, are turn of the century Victorian conversions. If people have experience of managing those types of properties, they're hard, they're quite difficult to maintain. The day-to-day costs are very expensive. They're not energy efficient, and they're not really accessible. So, along with many other co-ops as well that were founded around the same time, 1970s, 80s, we have an aging membership. I don't want to be ageist, but it is a reality. We still have 4 of our founding members. So they will struggle and will continue to struggle in the future with our properties. Lots of stairs, as I say, they're not accessible. We've recently had one member, we have managed to move to a ground floor flat, which means she can come and go with her electric wheelchair. It's the first time in about 5 years that she's been able to be independent and actually come and go from her own property without help. This is what we want to do for more of our members. And we know this problem's it's going to become more acute as time goes on. So that's our motivation to develop. We want to be able to provide accessible, energy efficient housing for more of our members, even more Londoners, however small. I think we just also felt there was quite a shift, quite an exciting shift, and a focus on smaller organisations. It's not just all about the big developers. So a lot of community-led organisations are thinking along the same lines. So I think we just felt it was the right time to think about the development and the opportunities that there could be. I did mean to share a slide with you. We only have 3 slides, not a lot to share, but I will just share a slide, and I'm going to hand you over to Jane, the finance
While
manager.
you do that, okay. Okay, hi everyone, it's great to be here. I'm the finance manager at Brockley Tenants Co-op, and I started working there in October 18. So we basically have quite a new staff team. Practically everyone at the co-op is new. And as Gina said, the motivation for us thinking about development was partly the unsatisfactory or increasingly unsatisfactory condition of our homes, in a way that they're not flexible. But also, obviously, from my perspective as a finance manager, this has a cost. Our properties were refurbished 40 years ago, and so the day-to-day maintenance costs are increasing. And there isn't that much way we control them. If something breaks or something happens, then it needs to be repaired. And we can see that our maintenance costs are increasing year by year. When I do a budget to see what we can afford to spend on a replacement programme, obviously that money will then shrink if we're spending more on day-to-day maintenance. And as a finance manager, I'm concerned that whether we'll be able to maintain our homes to a decent standard if we don't think strategically about what things are going to be like in the future. So one way of kind of dealing with that would be to buy some new properties. Also, you know, our properties we do have a strength in that our properties are in highly desirable areas and have high open market value. In addition to this, the increasing legal compliance and financial regulation of the environment that we all work in does mean that we need competent staff, and the co-op used to do a lot of work themselves. And although can you pass on the slide, Gina? And although some of us work part-time, there's a limit to how part-time people can work without the team falling apart. And we do have an awkward ratio of staff to housing stock. So another motivation is that if we increased our housing stock, we would have more rental income coming in, and then our overheads and our staff costs will be spread across a wider base. So that would also be preferable. As about 40% of our members are actually housed in properties that are owned by Hexagon, another housing association, and not by us. And they are facing exactly the same issues as we are in terms of property stock. And there's some of the stock that we've got members in that they would like to preferably sell if they became a void. So we do have also the prospect that our co-op could shrink in size in the future, because Hexagon might want to sell some of the properties when they become empty. So that's another motivation for sort of trying to think, be a bit more future thinking. Yeah, I think, so I think that's, yes, that's basically what I was going to say on that. Do you want to say briefly a bit more about what we've learned in our 2 years at the co-op, Gina?
Just one more minute. I won't take up too much more of your time. Just a little bit about the decision making of the co-op. Obviously, we're a tenant-led co-op. We're the paid staff, but we report to a management committee of 15 members. We have a series of one-to-ones over the summer months. I do have to put in here that Jane did most of the work on that. And just really interesting feedback from the members. Pretty much every committee member expressed a certain unhappiness with the way decisions were made at the co-op and the way the meetings were run. And don't want to be really negative about the co-op, but we are sort of quite old-fashioned organisations sometimes. And the way the committee meetings have run in the past, very much like we hold a vote, you put your hand up. It's very much like sort of, you know, there's a winning side, there's a losing side. People just felt that that was just not a good way to work collaboratively. We wanted a more consensus-based approach. So we started engaging committee members before the meetings, putting forward draft proposals, so that when we did actually meet, we could have just a much more positive discussion and hopefully get agreement amongst all the members, rather than people thinking, oh, I'm on the losing side of that vote. So we just wanted the committee members to come and be more positive, and just for the meetings to have a more positive vibe really for the members. So, and we feel that that has worked in the last few meetings, and the committee members just feel much more engaged with the process. Obviously that is something that we are going to need as we bring the members on board with this journey that we're just really starting. I'm literally just going to hand over to Jane for the last few final words, and then we're finished.
Okay, so I mean, there was one more thing that we've experienced actually in doing the one-to-ones with co-op members, the management committee members, is that the co-op has a very unhappy history of engaging with external consultants. It's partly our relationship with Hexagon hasn't always been good. But the co-op, a lot of co-op do think that consultants just come in and tell you what to do. And what we're trying to do is actually make sure that we're involved as much as we can in the process of hiring consultants and understanding the finances and understanding what's happening. And that also to try and engage with the committee members and the co-op members as a whole, and actually show them that they can have agency when they are dealing with outside consultants, and ask for things that they want, and sort of have less of an idea that consultants, you're just a passive recipient, which I think perhaps happens in other co-ops as well. Okay, that's the end of our bit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys. That was interesting and great. And I mean, it's the kinds of things that you're talking about, I think is quite common to a lot of co-ops, actually, especially kind of the issue of an aging membership and how do people move on and develop. And so I hope that you're successful in how you move on with that. I think our third presentation is, unfortunately, I think the person who was going to do it isn't available. And so Gemma from Community-Led Housing in London is going to talk us through it. This is Zahra Housing Co-op, and I believe it's a new one, and it's not one that I'm that familiar with. So I'm interested to hear what's going on with that. So over to you, Gemma.
Yeah, unfortunately, Ameen couldn't join us today, which is a real shame. So I can't do the same presentation that he would have given, so I think it's probably quite good to kind of outline firstly our role in this project. So as we kind of said at the beginning of the talk, Community-led Housing London is an advisory hub for community-led housing projects, and we're also a funder. So we've been advising Zahra Housing Co-operative and funding them for nearly 2 years. As Ameen was one of the first people to get in touch with us back in summer 2018, so we've been involved for a while now. Zahra Housing Co-operative are a group of families that, like most people, want to find affordable, secure housing. And as he can't join us today, I'm going to directly quote what Ameen says to explain the project. Zahra Housing Co-operative is made up of 4 families who live, work and worship in Harrow. We want to build affordable, intergenerational family homes that maintain our local connections with the wider community. These homes will cater for families that need 3 to 4 bedrooms where the family can thrive and grow, supporting intergenerational living, rather than the 1 and 2 bed flats currently being built by the private and public sector. As a cooperative, the home's affordability will be protected in perpetuity by our objects, and no individual will profit from the sale of any home. So I've, as I said, worked with Ameen now for a couple of years and understand that their collective experience, so they're all private renters, and that experience is incredibly disempowering. They've had to move at very short notice. They've been subject to really bad management, such as repairs, etc. And the rents are really high and means that they're kind of overcrowded. They also can't find housing on the market that caters for the way they want to live in this intergenerational way. And multi-generational households can bring many benefits, including help with childcare, support and care for elder relatives, and health and well-being benefits, such as tackling loneliness and isolation. And although research compiled by NHBC Foundation shows that more than 1.8 million households in Britain contain 2 or more adult generations, most homes are still built in that kind of traditional family home layout. So I'm personally very excited about this project because I think Zahra have come to cooperative housing as a viable alternative to private rent. And they're looking to diversify the types of homes which are currently available. So yes, as advisor and funder, we've been mostly involved in their development journey. So and I'd be really interested to hear thoughts and questions on this as well, because this is the majority of the work that we do. So in 2017, so that's before our involvement, Zahra received £5,000 funding from the London Borough of Harrow to identify suitable sites for community-led housing and kind of put together a proposal. And I think that came from an initial workshop from the local authority that just kind of said, oh, we'd like to hear from different people that would be interested in community-led housing, and Ameen was at that meeting. So they went ahead and identified a site. It's a small council-owned garage site, and we've been helping them to look at that site's development potential. So with our funding, they went out to tender for an architect, and they've been looking at the capacity of the site, so essentially how many homes can be built. And the capacity study has come up with a really interesting typology that supports intergenerational living with a 3-storey house. The ground floor has an accessible bedroom and bathroom for older members of the family. And really quite interestingly, thinking about it as long-term, the long-term life of the cooperative, they've been designed in such a way that the property can be easily converted into a ground floor property and a maisonette above, should the cooperative makeup of the cooperative change, and to address kind of future voids in the future as well. We're currently looking at the financial viability of the project, and as I'm sure you're aware, has many moving parts, so it's constantly changing. And as well as trying to make this affordable, to bring down build costs, we're looking at kind of finance costs. So what are the going out to lenders and finding out what their terms are, and constantly trying to make that rent level affordable. And small sites are hard to make viable because most projects are cross-subsidised by either market sale or intermediate housing. So this project is really only going to be viable at affordable level, essentially, if the site is free from the local authority on a long lease. So there was some hope this year. A success is that in March this year, so it was just before lockdown, actually, the same week, there was approval in principle from the London Borough of Harrow for the disposal of small HRA sites, that's housing revenue account sites, to community groups for the development of community-led housing. And that's subject to finance and planning. There is a line in there that says that they can consider nil consideration. So that was really a great motivator for the project to carry on. So we've just been carrying on during lockdown, trying to get that feasibility study even neater so we can take it back to the council and show what we've been up to, and essentially propose that the co-op enter an agreement to lease, subject to planning and finance. Again, those things are constantly changing, we're constantly revising them. It's anticipated there will still be a funding gap, and Zahra may need to look at putting together a loan stock offer. So in Ameen's absence, I think today it would be really interesting to hear from the audience about the motivations existing co-ops might have to invest in new cooperatives. And maybe that leads on to Leonie and Cash really quite nicely as well.
Hey, Leonie, I don't need to do any further introduction. I'm interested to hear what you're saying. You're from Cash. Great.
That's perfect. Thanks, Gemma. Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm Leonie from Cash, a community benefit society and community land trust. Cash stands for Community Assets for Society and Housing. And as Matina said earlier, I also live in Sanford Housing Co-op. So there's an overlap, but that makes sense because we started basically to form a community land trust back in 2018. And this came out of a couple of people meeting by chance at a conference organized by Co-ops for London at City Hall. And we just talked about basically what we're talking about today. And if existing co-ops would be interested in developing, expanding their housing stock, taking on new projects, how you can get new housing or working cooperatives off the ground. And yeah, since then we met one sunny Sunday in summer 2018, and since then we have been meeting every 3 weeks. And we started with probably members from 6 different housing co-ops, all in Lewisham, all very local, and loads of people just from the neighborhood who were interested. And yeah, this has been going very successfully. We are just going to share, could be some slides. 1 minute, sorry. Oh. There we go. So exactly, so this is the name of the CLT. And yeah, we came into being 2018 and we incorporated then in May 2019. And we got loads of support from the Community Housing Hub, from the National CLT Network and the local Deptford Challenge Trust. And with the money we got from them, we could actually start really thinking about how co-ops could work together. We have to say that our current membership is only individuals. So even though I am living in a housing cooperative, I'm just a member of the CLT as an individual. So Sanford Housing Cooperative, for example, is not a member yet, but this is what we are working towards, that we ultimately have cooperatives being members of a CLT to support the formation of new co-ops or to help those co-ops to expand their existing housing stock. So we have, we have been lucky to get some funding awarded, and we were able to engage some professionals to work on different things. So first thing is that we do site search. So we're really looking for a site for development. We are working with different co-ops together. very young ones which are just incorporating, or existing ones. So it's very interesting to have these different collaborations and then try to figure out how it works under an umbrella of a community land trust. So we have been looking at sites. We have started to do small capacity studies for sites which we see are promising. We have also employed Catalyst Collective to help us create a financial strategy, which is very important. So we have been looking at existing models that are out there. So for example, Your Space or the Radical Roots model, or things from other countries like the Mietshäuser Syndikat in Germany or whatever else, and have now started to bring together these different models and see what really works for us. If we are a community land trust, we want to engage existing co-ops, potentially motivate them and work with them together to expand their housing stock, but also get new co-ops in, which potentially are more like younger people with less income, but maybe a bit more time at their hand. So how to make this work, that's what we're trying to figure out at the moment. And we have also got some funding for outreach, which is really important because our current idea is that we start a Lewisham and that we keep it really local for now, because then loads of people will see the benefits, how you can actually incorporate cooperativism into loads of aspects of your life. So it's not only housing, it can be working, it's communal spaces. And so we're working on a diversity framework and all these things. Obviously, COVID has made things very difficult, especially with outreaching. So we have done as good as we can with like online events and film screenings and all sorts of things. But yeah, obviously it's not ideal. We just envision that because living in a housing cooperative, it really empowers you. You learn to self-manage your property, you have the control, you make decisions which are not only for yourself, they are for the people you live in a house with, they are for the whole neighborhood. And I think that's a very, very important learning. We have, obviously, because we have a lot of people from existing housing cooperatives, we know also what are potentially the shortcomings of living in a housing cooperative, or what potentially could be improved. So we're also talking lots about this. So we have, for example, implemented sociocracy as a way of making decisions, because we're at the very beginning where we are just strategizing at the moment, but potentially we're going to talk a lot about investment and money. So we should find a way where from the start out we are comfortable to have discussions and how we make decisions, because it might get really stressful. And yes, it is very interesting. It has been a very great journey so far. On the financial side, obviously, it is probably the most challenging bit. So for example, Sanford Housing Co-op does loan stock, or does provide loan stock to other cooperatives. We know that community shares is another way to fund potential projects, and we also look into some solidarity fund mechanism. So we are trying to combine different ways of funding different parts of a community land trust umbrella with cooperatives, which potentially would be the idea that the community land trust owns the land, that's what the land trust does, and then the housing cooperatives are doing the development, are financing the development in collaboration with the community land trust. And so we are still at the stage to figure everything out, and because we are inviting existing co-ops and new co-ops to come together, it's quite complex, but it is very exciting. And I guess it's up for discussion how this could actually really work. I think we have great ideas, but obviously we haven't tested it yet. So yeah, I would be really grateful to have a good discussion in the next couple of minutes, because this is what we are here for, I guess. And yeah, if you're interested in hearing more or seeing what our activities are, please get in touch. For now, we are looking at Lewisham because this is where we live. But I think, yeah, it would be really good to have a broader discussion anyway on these topics. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Leonie. And yes, we are going to be moving into a sort of Q&A session or a discussion session, I think, in a minute. Just kind of sort of summing what we've heard up. I mean, I think there's sort of four presentations of organisations. They're all looking at similar kinds of things, but all from a different perspective and so on. But it's all about how can we, use our assets in sensible ways to build more homes, either collectively or individually, I guess. But how can we work in partnership? And I think some of you have referred to it being a good time to be doing this, and I just reiterate that actually it is a really important time to be looking at this. I think myself and other colleagues have been involved with the cooperative housing sector for all our lives almost. It seems a long time. I used to have hair when I started, I think, and I don't anymore. But there's never been a time when there's been more things going for us in terms of developing new homes or new schemes than there is now. So what's going on nationally. I mean, I'm not so familiar with what's happening in London because obviously things have different frameworks in London. But certainly nationally, there is huge impetus out in just most parts of the country. Pretty much every local authority in the country now is at least paying lip service to community-led housing. And, we in the CCH, we've recently started to facilitate a group of representatives from local authorities coming together to talk about community-led housing. And, when we started that, we just thought, we'd get a few local authorities coming forward, but they're just streaming in. We got, within a couple of weeks or something, we had about 55 local authorities from across the country saying, yeah, we're up for this, and it's growing all the time. And then, there are projects happening everywhere. There's, we in the CCH, we've been working on training and accrediting people who can work with schemes to help get them developed. And there's something like about 250 odd people who've been going through that process, and we're doing the training course over and over again, and it's incredible amount of learning and incredible amount of inspiration going on. And whereas with nationally, I mean, there was this community housing fund that operated nationally that was finished in March of this year, and we're still waiting to see what may happen with that. You guys in London, you still have funding from the GLA, so and I think that's there. It was originally for 3 years, I think, wasn't it, Gemma, or something like that? And I don't know how much longer you've got to go of that, but
2020.
Sorry,
2023.
Right. So this is for co-ops and so on in London who have got ideas, have got assets, have got people. Now is the time to get on board with this. Talk to people like on the 4 groups here. Talk to community-led Housing London. Get on the case, guys, because now there won't be a better time. I mean, it's like if you get sort of organisations like the GLA getting behind this sort of thing, they don't see the results. They don't see homes being developed. It won't come again. So we've got to really make this happen. I mean, it's also, just noted that, I don't know, people may be familiar that the government has just published its social housing white paper yesterday, which has long been waited for. And, there's a little section on community-led housing. Now, I mean, 5 years ago, that wouldn't have happened. This is the time, guys. Get out there, make it happen. Cooperative homes everywhere in London. So anyway, right, sorry, I'll stop the rant now, but that's what we got to do. So get in touch with Gemma. Gemma will sort you out and make it all happen. So we have some Q&A, and there's a lovely gentleman who I haven't actually seen, but he's called Rowan, he's going to help me out. There's a bit on the bottom of the screen which says Q&A, and I think people are supposed to put their questions in there. Sometimes people put things in the chat, and I think my friend Rowan is going to tell me if people have put things in the chat. But before that, I'm going to go through what we've got in the Q&A. So if people wish to add to the Q&A, and I mean, where it says Q&A, questions are fine, but comments are also fine. So let's have a look to see what we've got here.
So Nick, we had one. Hi everyone, I am the tech guy behind the curtain. I thought it'd be helpful to bring Mariangela on, who had a specific question for Matina, but it also kind of ties into a wider question, I think, around how co-ops are adapting to their changing demographics, whether that's kind of changes in age or household size. So I'm gonna bring Mariangela on. You can ask her question, but I think it would also be good to kind of feed that question into Gemma about Ameen, and also Gina about Brockley. That was something that you were really picking up on as well. Mariangela, you don't have to turn on your camera if you don't want to, but are you there? Hi.
Hi, I don't mind turning it on. Let me just turn on the light too.
Do tell people what co-op you're from as well.
Well, I'm wearing two hats. I'm both from Sanford Housing Co-op in Nottingham, but I also work at World Habitat on global community-led housing, so I'm interested from various perspectives. And I was just interested in, yeah, you're right, Rowan, kind of more widely thinking about membership. And if I understood the presentation correctly, in the case of Sanford, the initial interest was around young people, or there was a need for housing for young people. But I was wondering whether that is still the case and whether you still cater to specifically that group. And then there was other mentions about, the membership aging, and yeah, so it would be interesting to hear more about membership criteria and needs, etc. So thank you so much. The presentations were fascinating.
Hi, Mariangela. Sanford keeps on having the same membership criteria in respect to not age directly. It's not related to students or age specific, but it's single people's homes. So each room is allocated to a single person due to the architecture as well, due to the capacity of the buildings, but also it was given to the co-op by the government with the caveat that no family would ever live there due to the contamination of the site. There is dispute about how contaminated the site is after 50 years, because we have gardens and there probably is a mitigation of all this, but still it's a single people's occupancy. And we have one wheelchair access house, which this is what we want to expand on.
Hey, Gina, or Jane, do you want to just say something on this issue? I mean, because I think you were referring on to it. Yeah.
So just quickly, our membership, we're not specifically aimed at any age. Our application is basically based on housing need. So you just do need to be a local person with housing need. But it's just, as I say, I think it is common to a lot of co-ops that began in the 1970s and 80s. Obviously, we have secure lifetime tenancies. So, our turnover is very small. Only a handful of properties each year are re-let. So, most people come into the, probably were young in the 70s and 80s, but have aged. So that has just created our sort of our membership being of an older generation. It's not that we stop, young people coming in. If we re-let a flat, they could be another young person. But that has basically just that knock-on effect of being created at that time in the 70s and having those long-term tenancies. That's the impact on us. And obviously, yeah, having the Victorian street properties that, every single, you can see it as on my first slide, it's just even our ground floor flats have that flight of steps up to the front door, which is that classic street property.
Gemma, did you want to say anything from Zahra's perspective? I don't know how familiar you are with those issues.
Yeah, so I think I said in my initial presentation, they're coming to this because the market isn't really providing the kind of homes that they want or the way they want to live. But I do also appreciate that actually a lot of those 1-bed, 2-beds, it's all this kind of viability game. They're the ones that that make a scheme viable. So actually they're being quite ambitious, I think, with doing a large family unit on a small site. And I think what's interesting in an intergenerational model is effectively you have 2 households. So it's one house, which is a household, but really you've got 3 generations in there. And so actually we could start, you could effectively say that's 6 households, not 1, not 3. So I think that's why it's interesting. They're really challenging that kind of metric. So when we start to go to kind of capital funding and it's kind of a grant per household, they're starting to challenge what that really looks like to reflect the way that they want to live.
Leonie.
Yeah, I just
Yeah.
wanted to add something to the question in regards to Sanford. First, I mean, Sanford is contaminated, but it's not worse contaminated than anywhere else in London, just to say that. But yeah, because it's close to the railway lines and so on, it was deemed unsuitable for family housing. And yes, it was built single occupancy, but it doesn't mean that people have to be single. We had married couples and everything, but you apply as a single person for a single room. That's how you deal with it. And then if you have 2 rooms, you have 2 rooms. So that's fine if you are a couple. The other thing is we also had, so that there were children born in Sanford and all this, but you can't stay because it just doesn't provide the architecture. It's just the rooms are small. They are like maximum 12 square meters. So it is not very large. We obviously had this discussion when we thought about expanding Sanford's housing stock, if there is some interest of the current membership to diversify on the typology of housing. And obviously we looked into different, either to build on our own site or to build somewhere else. And it came quite clear that if you have a certain working typology and our houses are all the same, they're just mirrored plans, people would prefer to just keep this going as a very footprint or a blueprint thing. If you look at other sites, obviously this would be a different option. So yeah, I think it is really worth thinking about finding something which is more suitable for family housing. But yeah, Sanford is not providing for this at the moment and is not planning to really, unfortunately, yeah.
Okay, let's move the debate forward if that's okay. I'm just thinking we've got Martin from the fantastic Bunker Housing Co-op in Brighton, and I know Martin has put up a lengthy point on the question thing, which is really interesting, and it's certainly something that I've sort of proposed before at the CCH, is that looking at sort of ways in which we could sort of maybe have a different sort of regulatory system that would enable funding to be, you know, the assets of the organisations to be better used. But Martin, I just wondered if you could, because the story of Bunker Housing Co-op, I don't know if your camera can come on. I don't know if you're somewhere, but the story of Bunker Housing Co-op is pretty inspirational. So just give us a few words on that, and then just lead us into your revolutionary ideas.
Yeah, hello everyone. Yeah, so my name is Martin. I'm from Bunker Housing Co-op, and we have been. I would like to start by saying we have been the recipient of.
Sorry, Martin, you're a bit quiet.
I'm going to turn my camera off and see if it helps, because my internet is terrible. Really bad internet.
That sounds all right, Martin.
Yeah, can you hear it? Okay, good. Yeah, so I think everyone can hear me now. Yeah, so sorry about that. I've just got very bad internet, because although we have built our first 2 co-op homes, we haven't been connected by Virgin Media yet. So it seems that a small organisation is far more efficient than a big one sometimes. But anyway, so first to start off, we have been very lucky to receive loan stock from some of the co-ops, several of which I think are here. So Sanford was one of the co-ops that invested loan stock in Bunker, that helped us build our first 2 homes. So yeah, we're a housing co-op in Brighton. We're fully mutual housing co-op. We started our first pilot scheme on a ex-garage site of the local authority. When did we start? A few years ago. We completed this year. I think it took 4 years all in all with the negotiations, the beginning of the negotiations to completing the houses. We've also got a further 4 sites throughout the city, also infill sites that we'll be leasing from the council. We're a co-op for low income families, households and individuals. So we rent those sites at quite a low rate. £250 per year per unit was the price we settled on with the local authority, which works very well. It's not quite a peppercorn rent, but you know, it makes it affordable. And our rents are kind of set at a maximum of local housing allowance, but we are looking at bringing them down to a living rent, which is 37.5% of living wage, so to bring them down even further. So yeah, that's us. I mean, we're working on 4 other sites at various stages. We're just about to hear back about planning permission on a 2nd site. We've just got pre-planning feedback on our 3rd site, and we're about to put in pre-planning on our 4th site. So we're quite busy with the whole sort of development thing. But yeah, so to come back to I mean, I started by saying that we've been the recipients of loan stock from individuals and other co-ops, which has been great. I mean, we raised £108,000 loan stock for our 1st site, which went a big way to making it happen, because this was pre any kind of grant funding at the time. But going through that process, and also being a part of CCH and being a part of Community Land Trust and working as a community housing enabler myself, we constantly come up with the idea of kind of risk aversion and how can we kind of encourage, I suppose, co-ops, housing co-ops, but also housing associations that are kind of sitting on large amounts of capital that came initially via grant subsidy or asset transfer or these other things. How can we release that funding? How can we get that circulating again amongst us? And so my suggestion was, could we, in 2 ways, kind of within the model rules of a co-op, along with the asset lock, could there be a surplus unlock? In other words, something that meant that when the co-op or organisation reached surplus or point of profit, that there would be a mechanism that allowed that grant surplus, that grant payment, that public money to be paid back into a pot that they could be used to develop other groups and organisations. And also, could this go hand in hand with a regulator of housing co-ops, similar to the regulator of social landlords, that could kind of oversee this process, but it could also be kind of run by co-ops in a way that could oversee that process by granting access to that funding pot, but also ensuring that those payments were made without obviously putting the organisation into any jeopardy or anyone losing their homes. So that's my kind of talking point, really. And I know it has been talked about before, but I wondered if there was how people felt about, whether there was any kind of thoughts around that, strongly pro or anti that amongst the panel and others.
It's quite a big topic to throw in, and we've got sort of 24 minutes discussion, and I've got a number of other questions. Yeah. I think the idea is an interesting one, and I think it's certainly something that we can explore further. But can we just run through the other questions so that we make sure that everybody has put in their, the things that they're asking? So can we just go to Andrea? You're asking, you've got a question about cultural aspects of risk and what have you. Can we just have that discussion about? You there, Angela? Andrea, sorry, not Angela. Andrea.
Hi. Sorry, I'm just sorting out. Just moved rooms, as it turns out. I missed that last bit for some reason with my connection. Were you inviting me to just expand on the question, Nick?
Or just ask the question, just raise the question, yeah. Yeah,
it's just my experience. Hi, I'm from Brighton Hove Community Land Trust, and my experience of talking to some of the well-established co-ops is that what happens inside the co-op is you get often a minority, it's not necessarily a majority, but you get a hardcore of people who are really risk averse, who really don't want the disruption of new projects. And I think it's a really challenging problem. I mean, like Two Piers in Brighton is a well-established co-op, but that's what happens with Two Piers. Every time a new project is mooted, there's a core of people who just sort of say, no, it's too risky. And I think that's a cult. I don't know if anyone's got any ideas of how we address that.
Yeah, okay, so that kind of does certainly relate to what Martin was saying. I'm going to just take one more question, then I'm going to go around the panel with those 3 questions, if that's okay. So I've got Martin Dumont, and your question is in relation to financing, I think, is your question. Do you want your question, and then we'll go around the panel with all 3 of those questions and see what people to say in those areas, if that's okay.
Hiya. Can you see me?
We can. Go for it.
Right. I mean, picking up the last question, really, my co-op just recently has looked at 2 developments. We were looking at building on a car park that we owned, and we are currently, we've just finished discussing 2 possible sites in Waltham Forest that Waltham Forest have put on the market. And last week we had a discussion about whether we were going to do that, and we've run into the same discussion hurdles every time, which is how do you fold a new development into an existing quite well, not rigid, but quite sort of established financial structure. And the big stumbling point, of course, is not just the amount of work required to get a scheme up and running. For an organisation that actually doesn't have much need, because we're all housed. It's not like the days when we all started and we were gung-ho because we were all in short life. And the other thing is, how do we manage to basically enfold any new developments into the existing rent structure? Because people really are faced with the idea of somehow looking at basically having a massive rent hike in relation to the existing units, and our existing units were developed under 95% grant rates. So our rents, you know, the rent of my flat I'm sitting in now is £55 a week. And that is the big stumbling point. And I think the thing that this discussion needs to address is the difference between theory and practice, especially in London with land values, in relation to the co-ops being quite organic structures, their products of their history and the people who live in them. And, you know, how do you get them to think differently and to think in a far more strategic way? And picking up Martin's point, I did suggest at the last CCH strategic day that we should look to move towards to be the regulator for co-op housing, because I think we might get the idea, if we got everybody under one roof, we might start to foster the idea that we should start acting more collectively rather than the individuals we've been for the last 35 years.
I've also proposed that, Martin, before.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to bring the panel in now in terms of these 3 points. I mean, we've got an issue here, I guess, where existing members are risk averse or don't quite see the need or are a bit frightened about rents and so on. Martin, I think, is sort of suggesting a bit of a sort of carrot and stick approach almost, of sort of saying, actually, we could set up a you know, cooperative housing regulator that does some sort of work to actually either encourage co-ops to develop or to make it happen in some other way. What have we got comments-wise there? Shall I bring Matina? You've got your hand up. I'll bring you in first, Matina.
Thank you very much.
I'm going to Jane and everybody else.
It is a very interesting idea, and that's how cash was created as well, in order, because we could see all this surplus of and money sitting in a bank and actually not being developed for the cause that we are all here to create more co-op housing. It's a great idea to explore. I imagine it's a long-term idea to explore, because co-op members have to decide on it, and I can see many discussions ahead of us. The question that Martin Drummond posed about the challenge to expand solely as a co-op, it brings down to raising the rent. Even with our financial model that we're still working on it, the whole development team has been discussing and finding out that the only way that we can afford to do anything, despite buying land, assuming that the public land will be given to us, we need to raise our rents. And it's not viable for any company not to have inflation. For example, Sanford hasn't had inflation for the past 3 years. 3 years or more, 6 years. I don't remember. I have never had my rent being raised, not even for inflation. And it is challenging to see how you can pose these questions to the membership, but we have to address the vision as well. And we are below social rent as well for our area.
Okay, Jane, you were trying to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say for sure how it's going to turn out at Brockley, because we haven't actually done a sort of capacity study or analysis on a real site yet. But we do have real pressures on us to do something, because if you have properties that you've had for quite a while and they need work on them, you get you have dwindling returns. And I think our co-op members are risk averse, but I have persuaded them that if they think about where we're going to be in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, and that you could be faced with selling a void in order to mend if you had 3 bad roof repairs that needed doing in a go, for example, this kind of really has focused their mind to think, yeah, actually, we can't just sit here and stagnate. I mean, housing co-ops is the same at every business organization, is that if you keep on just doing the same thing, you won't get any bigger and you won't be successful and you will stagnate. And all organizations that transact commercially have to think about where are we going and have a plan. And it's true that our co-op has been reluctant to do that, but I kind of think that we certainly have a lot of financial pressures on us, although I'm not sure how anyone before me has actually articulated that.
Just add a little further point for those that are registered provider housing co-ops. The regulator has introduced these things called value for money metrics, which are a set of measurements, financial measurements that go into your annual accounts that will indicate to the regulator how much, I guess, gearing, as in what capacity your organisation has financially to develop new properties. Which means that the regulator will be able to look across all the co-ops, the registered provider co-ops, in the country, to say how much is their capacity to develop new homes here. And, if you have co-ops that paid off their loans and, developed with the 95% grant funding that Martin talked about, then the indices that the regulator will be getting will be sort of saying, actually, this co-op could be developing homes. Now, how quickly they're going to do anything about that, for small scale co-ops, because they're probably going to be looking at larger organisations more than co-ops, but it may come up at some point. And so it's something that co-ops do need to be thinking about, because otherwise they may find themselves under pressure from the regulators to be doing something in terms of development. So there is an incentive there. And as I've said before, if you're going to develop homes, now is the time to be looking at it, because we've got community-led housing London who can help you, and there's other things out there at the minute to make it happen. So, yes. I don't know if the rest of the panel, Gina, Leonie. Leonie, did you want to comment on the issues that Martin, the two Martins and Andrea were raising?
Yes, I guess so. I was, unfortunately, my internet connection is quite bad, so I got kicked out and missed most of the discussion. So please stop me if I'm talking about something else. But I think this is part of the idea of what Cash tries to do, and that's why we try to stay local for now, that we say we want to bring existing housing cooperatives and basically anybody who's interested in more cooperative housing, working or social spaces together, and create not only a community land trust, but also some kind of solidarity network where people can, or institutions or cooperatives can become part of it and, let's say, invest in certain ways. So, loan stock is a long established mechanism which works, which is project based basically, but then there's also other things which are community shares, which are also some kind of project inspired investment, I would say. But then other things like a solidarity fund, which could work as something which existing co-ops pay per, I don't know, pound income in rent or per square meter of living area, whatever, or per member, which could give some kind of continuous income to a community land trust, which then could provide services which are, for example, because in Sanford it is the whole expansion work is be done by volunteers, right? So if you don't have some individuals who are interested in doing this, it will not happen. So with the community land trust, you try to some kind of, at a very low cost level bring professionals and interested people together to actually get experience and work on these steps which are necessary for a co-op to expand, and then offer this as some kind of cooperative service to other co-ops. And also to, I think another very key thing is obviously the rents. And you want to have, so Cash is only interested in affordable rental models. So we don't want to have, at the moment, the idea is not to have any shared ownership or whatsoever. So this is kind of very, very optimistic. But I think our current hope is that we could establish a network big enough to cross-subsidize rents from the beginning so that it always is affordable. But obviously this is dreaming. Potentially, we haven't done the math yet. But yeah, so that would be my contribution to this question. I hope that was
the most exciting things come from people dreaming. So I agree with the principles of what you're trying to do. Gina, did you want to add anything to that discussion?
I suppose just to add on the membership and being risk averse, there isn't an easy answer. It is just about engaging with the membership early on. I mean, I think it was over, as I say, we're right at the beginning of our journey, but I think it's nearly a year, and we did actually have what we called strategy meeting, just to kind of drip feed the idea to members of the direction that we wanted to go in. So yeah, there's just no easy answers. We're just going to be, you know, co-ops are small, so we know our members, so we have that advantage. So not everybody is going to want to be involved, but you know, people that live in a co-op, it is unique. It's not just living in any old house. So most of the members joined the co-op for a reason and realised that they wanted to be involved. They're community minded, so we have to use that and, you know, garner that enthusiasm and that passion. And you know, I really think co-ops have that opportunity to do that because we are small, we're community based, we're not a big housing association where a resident is just a number or a name. We know our tenants personally. I think that is the way that we need to be going.
Okay. Can I? I'm just going to take 3 more questions on the Q&A, if that's okay.
Nick, can we bring in Gautier's got his hand up from Catalyst Collective with a point on that, and also Colin from Phoenix.
I'm just concerned that there are other questions on the Q&A.
Yeah.
But okay, if you want to, yeah, go on then.
Only if there's, I think I'll bring in Gautier and also Colin to ask his question about young people as well.
We do all the questions in one go that are outstanding, because otherwise we're just not going to have time to get through all the questions. And can we keep them brief at this point, because we haven't got a lot more time?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm just going to be very brief in that case. So hi, I'm Gauthier, I'm from Panellists Collective, and I'm an advisor in community-led housing on legal structures and financial modeling, and I've been working with some of the co-ops on the panel today. But I did want to talk about quickly the issue of trying to mobilize the resources present in our own sector, because this is something that has been of interest of mine, like for quite a few years. And I am also part of the Radical Youth Network, which has seen that issue in the sector for a long time, and even within our own network. So Radical Youth is a network of co-ops with quite a lot of housing co-ops, where some of them have paid back their loans and still willing to try to help each other. And similarly, we've been using loan stock, but we did at some point come up with a model of kind of secondary freeholder co-op. We commissioned a feasibility study on it, which came out quite well, and we did like a prototype, but we still face some kind of legal limitations and also tax issues. So we've kind of tried to evolve that model, and we're about to come up with another proposal quite soon. Which might help solving that issue. And the other quick comment I wanted to make was around the existing co-ops that aren't willing to invest or are risk averse or things like that. And you know, this is true, but I think we also need to take into account the fact that housing co-ops, you know, people there are busy already managing their own housing. That's already quite a lot of skills to have. Now managing investments is another set of skills, and I do think we are missing specific vehicles or specific bodies in the sector which are to do with investment to facilitate that work for existing co-ops. You know, okay, some of them might be risk averse and might not want to invest, but also I think we need to see that actually managing money, managing investment, taking risks involve a whole set of skills that isn't necessarily there in housing co-ops. Yeah, okay, I'm just going to leave it there because I want other people to speak. But
okay,
thank you.
We have Jessica, Julie, and Colin. I see that Julie's appeared.
Yeah.
So do you want to raise your question, Julie, and Rowan, if you can find Colin and Jessica.
Colin and Julie's questions are quite similar, so I'll hand over to Julie.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm from a small housing cooperative, Lambeth Self-Help, and we're doing a little bit of development. We're just in the early stages. So yeah, we definitely sort of hit the risk averse issue. And I guess one of the solutions I thought was, how could we get more younger people? So one of our driving forces, one of the driving reasons is very similar to Brockley. We've got underinvestment in our housing and we've got an aging population. So we're trying to sort of meet those two challenges. But sort of longer term, we also have an issue. We would like younger people to join the committee, but also younger people that we've heard speaking from Cash. And it's not just younger people, but it's people with energy and ideas. Those are the kind of people that I think it would be fantastic to actually have in our housing cooperative. I'm just sort of interested in how we could bring that together, really.
Okay. Colin, is your comment of a similar nature?
Colin, I think, has dropped off, so we'll move over to Jessica.
So Jessica, do you want to raise your point?
Yeah, my question was very specific. I was interested about how much this co-op housing is contributing to reduce homelessness, and if you have some statistics about it, like percentage of people or the amount of I don't know, members of the co-op housing stop being homeless after being part of your organizations or projects. Thank you.
Okay. Shall I go through then the members of the panel in relation to this? Matina, are you still with us?
I'm still there. I don't really have statistics. I mean, we don't have a nominations agreement with anybody. We manage our own waiting list. We have just housed our latest void was filled by a lady who's been just sofa surfing. So she was homeless, but we don't take people directly from the housing council waiting lists. So we have an open membership. Somebody has to have a housing need, and that is decided through our allocations process. Does that answer the question? But co-ops are very different in a way that they operate in that term.
Jane, did you want to say anything on these general issues that have been raised?
I suppose I could only just contribute that yes, it would be nice to have an influx of younger members to the co-op. I think that would bring new energy and new ideas, and maybe new commitment. I think that we recognise that in our co-op too.
Martina.
Yeah, in regards to Sanford, we don't have statistics either, but our membership again is not regulated by anybody else apart from us, and we take members from all paths of life, but for sure we don't let anybody homeless, whatever the circumstances.
I think generally speaking, I mean, if you're a registered, what's a registered provider, as in, you're developed with, funding from the government, and, especially if it's now, then you would have to make an agreement with the local authority as to who you house. And, especially in London, where there's obviously an enormous pressure on, the local authority registers, they will want to have nominations to new schemes that are developed now. So, most co-ops in one way or another will be contributing you know, tackling homelessness or, you know, or people and housing need and so on in the city. And obviously, yeah, a throughput of younger members is really important. Leonie, what
yeah, in regards to homelessness, I just want to add two things, one for Cash and one for Sanford. So for Cash, basically, obviously, we are not housing anybody yet. And it is meant that the projects, whatever we're going to do, are not defined by Cash. So it is the group or the co-op who are defining then the membership. That's what we are thinking of for the moment. But we have been outreaching to charity organizations who are doing housing work for homeless people and are looking into collaboration with some of those. So that's one point. We haven't done anything yet, but we are aiming to. And for Sanford, basically, I just want to say that Sanford is starting to try to have some collaboration with Lewisham Council to look potentially into housing young homeless people. But this is just an idea which will potentially materialize soon. And just in respect to the current COVID situation, just want to say that Sanford has done a great effort to support the current members, and we managed to, even though people were not able to pay their rents, that we managed to not evict anybody for any rent arrears. So we have done some solidarity work there where yeah, we released rents, or other people helped funding other people's rents and so on. So I just wanted to mention that.
really good. I mean, I've heard stories of that nature in many co-ops across the country, and it's great to hear someone doing that sort of stuff as well. But we're coming to the end of our time. I don't know if our friends from the Community-Led Housing London will give the members of the panel a couple of seconds just to say a final piece if they wish to.
I was going to suggest something we did on this morning's call, because there are so many great questions, and if people still wanted to stay on to the link, we could just keep this Zoom call open. So we could perhaps close the session now and thank those who have attended